Hoping you're having a wonderful weekend. We welcome you to Moral Side of the News. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. And with me today is a distinguished panel, as always, Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church, New Albany, Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. Welcome to you, panel. The House January 6th committee released new evidence this week of how far former President Trump and his allies wanted to go to keep him in the White House, and how groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers interpreted his calls for a wild rally on the day Congress certified Joe Biden's electoral victory. So, panel, I have two questions for you. Are you watching these hearings, and what's your reaction to this latest testimony?
How long is this show?
30 minutes or less, right?
So the two thoughts that have consistently been with me as I've been watching these hearings is what does this say about the moral fabric of our country, and from what can we learn from these about integrity of those we elect, those who run, and the messages that we receive through media. And then the second issue that comes to mind for me in all of this is the power of words. He said, she said, they didn't say, and the interpretation those words are given. So to pull back as a culture to think about and reflect on the power of the words that we speak that are either helping to build up our country or to tear it down. That's where I'm sitting with this big issue of January 6th hearings.
I think it's been fascinating. Yes, I've watched them. I've watched all of them. The proceedings have been fascinating. I've been impressed by the committee, the persons who are on the committee, and how straightforward and meticulous and methodical they have been with the proceedings. It is a deep sadness to see what happens when you have absolute power, and when power is grouped up among those who will support the awareness of a lie. I mean, one of the things that came from the last hearing is that the committee was able to show that all of the players in this farcical notion knew it was a farce. It was they were not they convinced their adherents and their followers that the election was stolen, and they knew they were lying. This is not that they really believed that there was something awry. They concocted this story. They knew it was a lie. And then the extent that they would go to actually plan when all legal recourses had failed, no proof was been able to give or to be provided to show the reasons why they were making the assertions that they were making, to knowledgeably, with knowledge, to say, we're just not going to give up power. Forget about American history. Forget about the democracy. Democracy lands at the feet of our desire for power. It's a sad situation. It is not new to this country. It is historical. We have had multiple iterations of this, maybe not trying to overtake the seat of governmental power, but in various different ways in life. When privilege has absolute power, those without that power run the risk of losing property, losing life, losing voice. This is, to me, it's particularly American.
And a loss of integrity.
Right. Well, I can agree with everything that's been said. I don't know, the pessimist in me, though, would indicate that, or say to me that even with what we have said, and I accept what we said again, and I concur, that there are people out there who, voted for President Trump, et cetera, and some of the hardliners, et cetera. Makes no difference. They're going to maintain the lie, as been shown. But I guess being living in a land we say is a land of law, in regards to the evidence permitted, remember, this is evidence from witnesses. And someone said, well, we just have their word. Well, it reminds me in my studies of sociology, whatever, that supposedly 85% of our knowledge is non-experiential. It comes from witnesses and testimony. So it depends on who you believe, et cetera. Now, even still, with all that's been said, and I think we could say the man is guilty of sin, but still there is no direct, as I understand it, no direct evidence to tie the president to all of this stuff in a sense of what is required by law. Now, I know the Justice Department is looking and examining the evidence, et cetera. But I've had from individuals, even people in the law, attorneys, would say to me that they don't anticipate much coming from these testimonies from a legal perspective, but they're saying what is being given in this testimony is evidence for the state trial, for instance, like in Georgia, which can basically bring about illegal incarceration, things of this nature. So I did not see the last, I've watched some, but the last testimony I did not see, and I'm hoping to see the one, was it coming up in about a couple of weeks or so in August, I think it is. It's going to be in prime time. That should be interesting to see what's happening there. But I'm like everyone's saying here, even if it's not legally damning, it certainly is damning from a moral perspective in regards to what has happened, what is being touted as having happened. And to listen to these people who were, like I say, were at the meetings when they say it's all hell broke loose at the meetings and people were lying through their teeth, et cetera. You sit back and you say, I'm not proud to be an American when I hear this, if this is what's happening in the White House at this time. And Colin, you're right, this is not the first time, obviously. I'm not talking about Watergate even. I mean, it goes beyond that as well. So I would say, yes, it's important that the American people hear these things, whether they accept the panel as legitimate or not. The testimony being presented seems to be at least some legitimacy in that testimony, which speaks volumes to me. So.
I hope there is something and I don't know what that something would be, that follows all of this speaking and truth finding and telling, so that right action can be taken, so that different choices can be placed before us and as a country and before those. And that sounds Pollyannish, but if we only have this on airing and people are speaking their truth, but we don't follow through with those next steps, then what have we gained if we don't hold people accountable? And that's part of the moral question too, isn't it? Of being held accountable for one's moral or immoral action. Right. And how do we deal with that?
The ultimate accountability is the ballot box within the realm of politics. And it goes to what was said before about the fact that we still have 20 plus million people who are still taking on the story of the big lie. And I call it the big lie because it really is. But there are people who really, believe that and are still waiting to hear Trump make his announcement for his 2024 campaign. He's having meetings among big time donors. They released that information today, that he's had a meeting in Nashville and having another one this weekend where he's contemplating, quote unquote, a run again. And it is just unconscionable to me, with all of the things that have come out from the committee's presentations of the evidence that they have gathered, how this person can still be considered a top candidate for the highest office in the land, given all that has taken place. It is such a witness to me of privilege that is just, it's amazing. There are others who would not even come close to even being considered if they just sneezed in the wrong direction, much less all of the things that this former president has done blatantly without any remorse or care. And yet, persons around him and 20 million people that support him turn the blind eye on that. The motivation of that is what has to be the question. And there's a political, sociological, there's a historic motivation. 2050 is coming down the pike. And I think that shift in demography is what's driving a lot of this. And the country has shown that when power is threatened, we throw all the rules out the window and we become the persons that we've been as a nation throughout history as it relates to changes like this.
Excellent. Well, we've got a lot of topics we want to sneak into this program this week. So let's go on to our second topic. Exercise with renewed caution about COVID-19. That's the word from the Biden administration, emphasizing the importance of getting booster shots for those who are eligible and wearing masks indoors, as two new highly transmissible variants are spreading across the United States. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, said, "We should not let it disrupt our lives, but we cannot deny that it is a reality that we need to deal with." End of quote. So panelists, here we go again. COVID-19, where do you weigh in on this?
I was talking to some friends last evening, and of course, you've heard the news as well. There's some discussion about allowing those of us who have a little age on us to also have a second booster, as it were, which would be about 4 or 5 shots already. And I'm all for it. They've already received theirs. But the whole thing, I also read recently that there are only 4 states in our union that does not have these variants already present. And so it is expanding widely. It's affecting the youngins again. It's not leading to many hospitals, but hospitalizations. But my understanding is about 90% of the hospitalizations for COVID now, it comes from these 2 variants. So it's not over for sure. And I would caution those who hesitate about the vaccines and all that stuff. My comment again would be, take the vaccine, not for yourself, for those you love.
Amen to all of that. I mean, we need to be boosted. I will be quadruple boosted whenever they tell me to do it.
That's right. I'm
going to be the first in line because I have immunocompromised loved ones that are in my home, that's in my church. Various places that I go are persons who have health issues, of which renders their immune system questionable. And it is just important for us to think about others. This is one of those good examples of where living by the golden rule can really help our country if we just put our, not so much, put so much emphasis on my individual freedom, but my individual freedom to ensure that my neighbor is safe. This is a great example of loving neighbor. My freedom ends where another person's nose begins. And I think that if we can all live by that, especially with this COVID, because BA.4, BA.5 is much more stronger as far as it spreads faster. And although the chance of you becoming connected to a ventilator is greatly diminished, there is still a potential for this to wreck life and health with long-term impacts if you acquire this virus. So those that are watching and listening, however you're hearing this, get boosted, get vaccinated, think about your loved ones.
Yeah, wear that mask. They even have cute ones now. I was talking with an older person who went through the tuberculosis outbreak and actually lived in a lung for months and remembers the bricks on the road or on the sidewalk that said, "Do not spit." And just thought that was kind of funny until he got that dreaded disease. And he said, when I think about COVID and people's hesitancy to get a shot, I just don't understand that, having come from that period of history where we were asked by public health, don't spit. Well, okay, I could do that, but I can also line up to get a shot, right? So how far are we willing to go to show that love for neighbor, whether we know the neighbor's name or not? And it kind of comes back to our first topic of the words that we speak and the actions that we do, and doing them with integrity, and it being community minded and not individualistically minded. And I think that's what burdens me most right now, listening to all of these news stories, is how much we as Americans are claiming what's right for me and not what might be even better for the community.
Damning as well, I think, is the statistics. What is it? 1/3 of the Americans who, 1/3 of America are living in these very dangerous areas where these viruses are coming forth, and they're not vaccinated. 1/3 of our American population is not vaccinated. That's damning in itself, and until we get something going with that group, we will face the spread, because those who are not vaccinated are the ones who help spread the variant. That's where they mutate in people who are not vaccinated, and then they're spread beyond that. So that's it's almost unfathomable that we would have one in every three people just refuses to be vaccinated. That just dumbstrucks me. I mean, I just don't understand that.
Well, I have a question for you, Tony. Do you think it would be different if our political climate was different?
I don't know. If you look, my understanding, look at any of the pandemics in the past, there were always those who were reticent, and not very hesitant about taking medical procedures, whatever. We even see that now in some areas where we saw that as mentioned, political, but politician who would say, use bleach or use horse tranquilizer or whatever it might be to defeat this shows total ignorance of science. And even if we say the folks are now believing in the God science rather than the God of salvation, it shows that they're not even good worshipers of that God if they're not going to basically obey what the science teaches us. And, as Mr. Spock on the old Star Trek shows used to say, 2 + 2 = 4, whether it's on Earth or the planet Vulcan. And so when the science tells us that, this stuff is dangerous and the vaccines work, for God's sake, 2 + 2, gang. So.
Well, historically, there's also the issue of trust of medical professionals and the trust of the medical system. And there's many communities that still, even after COVID, one of the reasons that there was a big, strong push within the African-American community for leaders to lead the charge to try to encourage our community members to get vaccinated in the first place, because we have that historic mistrust of systems and particularly the medical profession. And so we still have work to do. As long as these variants continue to develop, our work is not done. And I think that we've been so happy to now be out and flying again and, thinking that we're going back to normal when normal died 2 years ago and it's not coming back. And so again, we have, our work is still cut out for us to listen to those who have concerns, personal conscious concerns, medical concerns, and to try to work with them with love to try to convince them to either, if you're not going to get vaccinated, your sentence is a mask, mask it up, wherever you go, and just think of others, as we've been saying.
All right, panel, we're off to a rip-roaring good start here on this edition of Moral Side of the News, and we're going to go to a third topic, one I know you're all excited about. The James Webb Space Telescope launched a month or so ago by NASA. It's a space telescope designed primarily to conduct infrared astronomy, but it sent back its first images this week. Panel, let's hear your reaction to the shots from the heavens.
Well, I jokingly said before we started filming that the new satellite was able to pick up God playing golf or something, but no, obviously that's not the case. But it does show, for me, bringing in the divine, we're looking back further than we ever looked in history in the past. We're seeing expansion of the universe we've never seen before, which is still minuscule compared to the universe, which brings to my mind again the great love of the divine that in the midst of all of this expanse that's just almost unimaginable on this little grain we call Earth, that, God would come in and not only create his children, human children here, but also take part in that human history. It just, to me, it shows again the magnificence and the glory of the divine, and again, our unworthiness in regards to that divinity.
So I've been on my back deck with my wife with these two telescopes I have in my head, and just trying to imagining as far as the James Webb Telescope can see, and far back as well as far in current reality. Just seeing what I can see with my naked eye has been blowing my mind. The psalmist that says, "What is man that thou art mindful of him?" Just continues to echo in my heart. It's fascinating. I'm fascinated by the discoveries, the pictures. I can't wait to see more pictures. It is going to elicit a lot of good theological conversation that I can't wait to get engaged with colleagues and people of various different theological persuasions on what this means. And I'm praying that it engenders some good, healthy conversation. It doesn't become polarized like the current political environment that we have. But this is exciting. I'm grateful for this advance and can't wait to see what happens and what more we've discovered with it.
Science wins again. And it's so exciting. I think it's spot on. And in the big mystery of things, how timely that it's at this moment that we get these pictures from so far away that remind us of how small we are. And it's just spectacular beauty, isn't it? And I was looking up the Psalm you mentioned, Psalm 8. You've set your glory in the heavens, and then further down, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is humanity that you are mindful of us? Human beings that you care for us. I mean, that's pretty humbling stuff, right? And oh my goodness, did you guys see the supermoon last night?
Yes, I did.
She was spectacular, right?
Yes. It's fantastic.
So when you see these images and we talk about what we talked about in the first two topics, it tends to put a lot of other things in perspective, doesn't it?
Mm.
It does, but also if a tangent, if I may, if we have the wherewithal, God-given gifts to do what we're talking about, if we would dedicate that same mental and spiritual and emotional abilities, we could clean up the environment. We could do away with poverty. We could look at what we could do. Okay. But the fact that we're aiming, okay, this to me says, okay, here's a sign of the not the primary effect of causality, but secondary causality that God could use to make life here in this world much, much better. So
this discovery is a testament of human will and in collaboration with a divine hand who is awesome. But we don't solve the problems that really impacts our life daily because we don't have a will to do it. And the NASA people really shows what happens when you have one mind, one heart, and time is not an issue. But you can accomplish some great things. And of course, now hard sciences are much more easier to navigate than social and human sciences. The human will and the human brain continues to befuddle us every day. But yeah, I'm on board with doing all of our energies that we can do to try to make our human relating as prolific and as fascinating as the discoveries that we make in space.
Mm.
To your point, John, I think if we use just a fraction of that energy towards correcting what's politically wrong in this country, et cetera, we would just do marvels again. But it's, do we, as you know, Kilen said, do we have the will? And we find this entertaining, but it should also be educational and should also be pushing us always to do more rather than less. So
it's a glimpse of the possible.
Yeah, very much so.
Very good. I think we could do an entire half hour on the James Webb Space Telescope. Maybe we will in the future as more data and information comes our way. Okay, finally today on our program, Moral Side of the News, Kentuckian Abby Peterson was recently crowned the best in the world after winning, are you ready, the 2022 Chetwynd International Chainsaw Carving Competition held in British Columbia. And here's what he said. It's the World Series of Wood Carving. It's a big deal. He told the Courier Journal, winning was the highlight of my career, maybe of my life. Panel, we say congratulations to Mr. Peterson, but a question for you. Are any of you good with a chainsaw or other household item that might put you in a competition like this? I just tossed that out.
You do not want a chainsaw in my hand. Just trust me when I tell you that. Keep chainsaws away from me. I think it's fascinating. Sculpting with a chainsaw. What I love more is his story that led him to it. You know, that he was at a place that he was at a bottom point in his life and just began to start expressing all of that out into the wonders of something that he was a professional in, as far as, you know, working with wood and working with chainsaws. And then here we are. He's now the tops in the world. I love it. I love that story.
I was blown away by the image. I looked it up last night and oh my goodness, that he could see that out of that humongous log. That's spectacular imagination, right? And you're right that it came out of a time of depth, and out of that chaos came beauty.
Kind of like Da Vinci looking at a block of marble and saying there's a David or something in there, you know, whatever. But also, I to answer your question, in my ministry journey, yes, I have used chainsaws. And they are very good, but they're very dangerous, and they're just bulky. And to use it with finesse to carve, again, it just shows the ingenuity of the human spirit and the inspiration from the divine to be able to do something of that nature and create beauty and a form of beauty from it, at least recognizable images, if not beautiful images.
Well, he reminds us of all of our God-given ability, and that is to see in what others would consider to be the nothingness of a human life and to see unlimited potential in that person. And maybe not a chainsaw, but with, as has been stated by the words that we use. The words carve and craft, and they create possibilities for people's lives and their hearts. That's what we get to do in ministry on a daily basis. And it's a privilege to do that.
That's why we call it the word of God, the good news,
And on the other side of that, it's so interesting that it was a chainsaw that we see that's used to move away that which might have blocked a passage or a road after a tornado or a flood, right? It's used so utilitarianly, and then he uses it as a piece, a tool for art. So what is it that's in our everyday world that can be turned around to be used for creation?
I'd say anything and everything.
Indeed.
Congratulations to him. He's an outstanding artist.
Our last two topics, the Space Telescope and the Chainsaw Carver, give you hope. So it's a good way to end compared to the first two topics, would you say?
Yeah, good point.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, that'll bring to a close. Go ahead, Tony.
I was going to say, let's take some chainsaws and give them to Congress and see what happens.
That might be scary.
See what they can carve up, as it were.
Only if they've been vaccinated before they get them.
There you go.
And see, in that last 30 seconds, we tied the whole program together and put a bow on it. So thank you, Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, and Father Tony Smith. If you'd like to catch this program again or any episode from the past year or so, just jump on YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News, and you can watch it there. And Moral Side is now a podcast. Just search for it wherever you get your podcast. So thank you, panel. Until next week, we'll see you then. So long. Moral Side of the News is now in its 70th year, continuing on as one of the longest-running public affairs programs in America. Thank you for watching and listening and making it part of your week. Thanks for making the 69th annual WHAS Crusade for Children a big success. But you can still join in on the fun. Send your donation to WHAS Crusade for Children, 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. That's 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. Also, go online to WHAScrusade.org. That's WHAScrusade.org. And see the many ways you can help change a child's life. We'll be back again next week with an all-new conversation on Moral Side of the News. Please join us then. So long for now.